Welcome to this episode of Your Wellness MD podcast. Family physician and wellness expert, Dr. Daniela Steyn, has meaningful conversations that will take your health to the next level. She explores the connection between a healthy body, mind, and soul, and shares tips that will enable you to thrive. Dr. Steyn has helped thousands of people have a better quality of life by improving their health with science-based knowledge, education, better nutrition, mindfulness, and lifestyle choices. Join us today, empowering you to live your best life with optimal health.
Hi, I'm Dr. Daniela Steyn, and welcome to the Wellness MD podcast and YouTube talk show. Today, I have the pleasure of chatting with Stefan. Welcome, Stefan.
Thank you.
So Stefan is the owner of FITT by Stefan, which is a very big community of people really getting fit. And it's a whole movement that I've been following. And I'm so excited to be interviewing you today. Welcome.
Thank you very much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Tell us a little bit about yourself, your background, your interest in fitness. What did you study? Tell my audience a little bit about yourself.
100%. So my name is Stefan. I'm excited to be on this podcast. And I basically started my whole fitness and health lifestyle journey about 10 years ago as a very overweight young boy, where I really struggled to find my identity in society. And I really struggled to see where I can fit in and how people can perceive me as somebody that is respected, but also liked. And as a young boy, I really struggled to be liked because I felt overweight and very self-conscious. So I started digging into what it means to be healthy and eat healthy and exercise and what it all means for the body and also then for how people perceive you. And my initial journey then started off with me digging into that whole sphere of trying to lose weight. And I stumbled across many diets, as I'm pretty sure you're aware, that exist. And none of them really seemed to work because they were really super difficult to stick to. So I digged and I digged and I digged, and I started off doing personal training, just doing a normal personal training certificate. But that certificate just didn't give me enough to really help myself properly and the people around me. So I then took it a little bit further and enrolled in university. I did my first degree in sports science. That was a 3-year degree. And then I went on to do my honors degree in biokinetics. I kind of found a passion for human physiology, how the body works, and then how exercise ties into it all. So I really got tangled up in weight loss and the healthy side of what exercise and nutrition can do for you, more than just how you can look. I have this big opinion at the moment that your body and how your body looks is just a reflection of your lifestyle. So if you go and dig into your lifestyle and find all of those habits there that you're stuck in, if you can tweak them a little bit, then you can get the outcome that you're looking for. So that's in a nutshell who I am, what I do. Yeah, that's me.
That's great. And that is so profound. And that is something that is so important in my journey as a lifestyle medicine doctor, that when people come to me for weight loss, then I will have to say, wait, stop. It is not all about a diet. We're not going to put you on a cabbage soup diet and then be in great shape and then 3 weeks later be back at where you were. It's really about tying into that lifestyle. And it was also profound what you mentioned, your own journey that you've gone through. And how our view of ourselves and the view of our world can tie into what we look like, and for the good or for the better, right? Because on the one hand, we're really working towards people saying that you are more than what you look like. It's not moving away from diet culture on the one hand. But then on the other hand, what does make you feel stronger? What makes you feel more fit, and how, because we're not just body or just mind, we are intertwined, so it's so important how those things go together. And that's why I really enjoy what you're doing is your functional training. So tell us a little bit more about functional training. What is that?
So functional training in essence is to exercise and do exercises that will actually contribute to your lifestyle. So what you're doing on a daily basis. For example, taking something out of a cupboard. Most of the time when you do gym training, very strength-oriented training, you lose a lot of mobility, especially in your shoulders. Your chest muscles get really tight and you struggle eventually to get your hands above your heads or your hands behind your back. I don't know if you've seen those bodybuilders who struggle to reach behind their backs to scratch a little point. So I really got fascinated with that as well, because as a young boy, you're chasing this idea of looking so muscular and you're chasing big shoulders, big biceps. But at the end of the day, they don't really contribute to your life. In actual fact, they're actually just in the way. So I got really fascinated with movements that incorporate mobility, flexibility, speed, endurance. So I almost want to say it's a whole body approach to health and fitness and exercising rather than a muscle specific approach, if that makes sense.
Yes, completely. So it's not about the way you're going to look on the beach on your Facebook selfie. It's about practicality. How do you make yourself strong? And that's what I'm passionate about. Because I see people in hospital who are 90 years old and maybe fell and had a hip fracture. And your risk of dying in that first year after you've had a fracture is 30%. That's such a big thing. And then some of my patients with strong muscles get up the next day after their surgery and they go home. And then we have other patients, because their muscles are not strong enough, they have to stay in bed. We have to do rehab with them for a period of 4 weeks. They are significantly weaker. They're much weaker than their baseline. They never go back. And then I learned this interesting thing that the way our muscles will decline every 10 years, our muscles do decline as we get older. So things we do now in our 30s and our 40s and our 50s really determine whether we'll be able to be strong, whether we'll be on the golf course or running on the beach with our grandchildren, or whether we will really be bound to a chair when we're older. So from that perspective, it's amazing to me what you're doing with this functional training. So it's not about what you look like in a selfie. It's really, so for women, for men, it's this muscular sold shoulders. For women, it's maybe a perfect six-pack. That six-pack is not as valuable as just having a strong body.
Yeah. And people very often underestimate the difference between what a six-pack is and what a strong core is.
Yes.
You can have your six-pack muscles show up on a picture, but it could mean nothing for you in correlation with your core strength, where you could have a very weak pelvic floor, for example, but still six-packs abs showing on the pictures. So there's a different way of training that as well.
And that is quite important, especially for women. We need that strong core to prevent things like prolapse or urinary incontinence later in life when we're picking up our kids, when you pick up your grandchildren, to protect your back. So that core is quite important. And that's why exercise is so much bigger than your Instagram picture.
100%. I mean, I see it all the time when we work with ladies who just had a pregnancy, for example, where you're working with that diastasis recti afterwards.
Yes. Oh, I had it horrible.
And many people do, many of my clients do. And to get back from that to a normal core again, it's so much quicker if you had a strong core prior to the pregnancy. Rehab is just as important as rehab. And that's something that's underestimated, again, in society at the moment, is to really think about how strong are you before you get injured, rather than how quickly can you get back to normal.
And then when you work with clients, you don't just look at their strength and their physique, a very part of their plan and their lifestyle, because that's actually what you're doing. You're not just putting them on a diet quick fix. You're really looking at lifestyle and to implement it over a longer term so that you can stay with it for life, so that your whole family can join. And then when you do work with people, you also recognize that nutrition is a big part. Chat to me a bit about nutrition.
Sure. That's such a big topic at the moment. I made videos lately on intermittent fasting and all of the different diets out there that people are trying out, all of these quick fixes, these radical fad diets. This works and that works and keto works and at the end of the day, all that it's doing is it's skewing you into a neglective diet where you're trying to shove out certain food groups because you have this belief that this will help you get the results you're looking for. But at the end of the day, it's much simpler than that for the general person. The general person really doesn't need to go into such a hectic, restrictive diet. Yes, if you're a Olympic athlete where you're training 3 times a day and you're trying to achieve a certain weight and for that specific goal, which isn't healthy at all, then you have to look into something like that. But if you're a normal, healthy human being chasing health and wellness and sustainability, then a flexible diet, something that has also come up lately on the internet, is flexible dieting and what that's all about. So there's this thing that we're doing at the moment called calorie counting. Calorie counting, in essence, is trying to figure out the amount of energy that is in the foods that you're eating. And once you've calculated that, you can calculate how much energy your body needs. And once you've done that, you can put the two together and say, all right, so I can eat this amount of food worth of energy. My body needs that amount of food. And there I am at a homeostatic point. You can obviously then manipulate it into the one direction for certain athletes, like strength athletes often need way more carbs than fats and proteins, whereas your endurance athletes need way more fats and proteins than they do carbs. And then obviously your functional fitness athlete, your CrossFitter or your triathlete sometimes as well, depends on the distance thereof, needs a mix of them both. So every body is different and there is no such thing as a one size fits all. It would be so cool if we could just say this and this and this works, just do that. But unfortunately, it doesn't work like that. We have different muscles. Some of us have more type 1 muscle fibers and others have more type 2 muscle fibers. And that's genetic predispositions for it. So you really have to take into account of it. I saw a video of you the other day of somebody who's struggling with their thyroid hormones. I mean, even just something like that indicates a big change in your nutrition. And if you're not aware of it, and if you don't have somebody that can help you, or you can't find something on the internet to trust, then you're sitting with your hands in the air and you don't know what to do. So that's something I really noticed with the diet and nutrition industry at the moment, is there's this chase for a one size fits all, but it just doesn't exist.
Yes, it doesn't. And then, but you mentioned intermittent fasting. So are you pro or against intermittent fasting?
I'm very pro intermittent fasting at the moment for certain people.
For some people, that's the caveat.
Yes. So you get some people who function so well on it. For example, people who can control their cravings. So if you're intermittent fasting, the odds are if you're starting to eat at 1 in the afternoon, so you fasted all the way from 9 until 1, which is your 16-hour fast, 8-hour eating window, which is the normal intermittent fasting one. Those people, if you struggle to control your cravings, you're going to hit the biggest wall of your life at 9 p.m. You're going to have to stop eating. You're going to crave so much, and then it's just not worth it. But other people function so well on this intermittent fasting thing. Like myself, I can go training in the morning. I can have a normal functional day. My brain doesn't suffer at all when I don't eat in the mornings. But other people just don't function that way. And you have to kind of figure out for yourself, who are you? Are you somebody that needs to eat consistently? Or are you somebody that's body has really been adapted to function well on this long fasting window? Obviously, you can manipulate it. So the longer you keep your body in this fasted state and this intermittent fasting protocol, we call it, your body will adapt. Your body is so beautiful. It loves homeostasis. It loves to be in the set place where it can just stay comfortable. And if you take it out of that, it's gonna retaliate. That's just unfortunately how it is. Somebody who carries a lot of weight within, for example, if you have been overweight for a long period of time and you suddenly lose a lot of weight due to calorie restriction or however it is, your body's going to retaliate. Your hormonal systems have not yet adapted to this new weight. And that's why I also tell my clients so often that you don't want to lose weight too quickly. Because if you lose weight too quickly, your appetite center in your brain, it's going to pump up the hormones that make you feel hungry. So now all of a sudden you're going to feel like you're dying, but you're eating as if you can't eat no more. And your brain is still telling you you're hungry. So it's super important to remember that you can't lose weight too fast as well.
Or it just slows your metabolism if you restrict, on the other hand. So I've been surprised when I sometimes see patients that how little they eat, because a lot of people will say, oh, I eat nothing. Then I think, really, how is it possible to be so overweight and you're eating nothing? But then when we look at a food journal and we break it down, because those people restrict their calories to such an extent, their body is saying, oh, I'm in a famine situation, hold on to everything I've got. And then they also can't lose weight.
I tell that to my clients so often. You underestimate how quickly the body will just retaliate and say, all right, so it's a dangerous situation. It doesn't seem like there's enough food available around us. We must slow down everything. And every little piece of energy we get in, store it immediately. Don't use it. And that's then when you get situations where your energy levels dip during the day, the whole time, because you're getting in food. It's just feeling as if it's getting somewhere, and then it stores everything and you're back to square one again.
And that brings me to that insulin resistance that I know you do a lot of work on as well. So just to preface this, one of the biggest illnesses we see in North America is diabetes. And then for most people, diabetes can be prevented by diet. And our diabetes, so you get autoimmune diabetes, type 1 diabetes, and then you also get, which is an autoimmune disease, and then you get type 2 diabetes, which develops due to insulin resistance, which in essence is really developing now much more than previous generations because of our diet, with the standard American diet where we have maybe just processed foods, which could be a muffin for breakfast or a bagel for breakfast or a donut for breakfast, and coffee and cream, and then also a processed diet like a pasta lunch, and then for dinner a pasta again. And that's what I mean with processed, is anything that's made in a factory, anything refined, high in sugar. So we now see a lot of people with diabetes because every time when you eat something sugary, your body has to secrete insulin, and then your body becomes resistant to these insulin spikes. And when people become insulin resistant, that's when they develop diabetes. We have a little bit of a window between a healthy young kid, someone with insulin resistance, and someone with diabetes, but it's all on the spectrum of the same illness. So chat to me about insulin resistance. What do you do for that? How do you, because I know you've been helping clients with their exercise to improve their insulin resistance.
I mean, you can attack insulin resistance from two sides. You can attack it from the one side where you have all of these blood sugar spikes and the body has to really work hard to keep the blood sugar levels normal. So it puts its pancreas into overdrive to produce all of this insulin. But at the end of the day, what happens is the body just can't get to a point where it keeps the blood sugar low enough and the pancreas get overworked. And then those cells that produce the insulin die. And that's ultimately what leads to you becoming a full-on diabetic dependent on insulin. So I have two theories on how to approach reversing insulin resistance if you're not to the point where those cells have already died. And that's the nutritional side of it and the workout side of it. So the nutritional side of it is just as you say, avoid things like your saturated fats, your animal-based fats, because they go and pack around the cells, making it much more difficult for the insulin to go to the receptors on the cells. So that makes you insulin resistant. And then obviously don't make your blood sugar spike too often. So have complex carbs if you have carbs. Avoid the processed carbs if you do, just to avoid all of those spikes for the body to deal with. That's the one side of it. And then the other side of it is a really, really interesting thing to do with exercise. So you get two types of energy systems in the body. You get an energy system that is dependent on carbs to produce the energy to use, and you get an energy system that is dependent on fat to make energy. So usually what you see is you'll see a strength athlete, somebody who lifts heavy weight very quickly. They are very dependent on the carb energy cycle. And somebody who does resistance training, they're very dependent on the fat energy cycle. So you'll see long distance athletes, they don't have a lot of fat on them because they burn through it quite quickly. Their bodies have adapted to it. And you get the strength athletes who are big and they sometimes carry a little bit of extra fat on them because they don't use that fat as quickly. Right. So if I approach it with a client and say, all right, listen, we want to reverse the insulin resistance, it depends on whether they are really detrained or whether they just became insulin resistant due to bad nutrition. Because if you're detrained, then we can't go all in from the beginning. We have to kind of steadily get your body used to exercising again. And that alone will increase your insulin sensitivity. The body will go and add new receptors on the cell walls to make it again react to the insulin coming in to help it get the energy it needs. That's the one side of it. The other side of it is introducing a high intensity interval training protocol in the person's training program. And how that works is really cool. So if you're doing a high intensity exercise, your body really needs glucose to make energy. But that glucose cannot go into the cell if the cell is insulin resistant, because insulin, that molecule, opens up the gate for that glucose molecule to go in. So if the cell can't open up to take the glucose and make energy, it sits with an issue. So if you're now pushing the body to produce energy with carbs, but it's insulin resistant, then the body is going to adapt by adding new receptors on that cell wall, which is an awesome thing that we can do to make you insulin sensitive again. So from the one side, you kind of want to decrease the fat that packs around those cells. And on the other side, you kind of want to increase the receptors on the cell to give you like best of both worlds to reverse the insulin resistance. And
that's incredible. So well. Yes. And it shows how much you can be in control of this health journey, right? Once your doctor tells you, oh, you have type 2 diabetes, it doesn't mean, oh, this is the end. it means there is still a lot of grounds for you that you can do with exercise, with nutrition to regain your health.
Definitely. And
Now,
it's
that's
amazing.
something.
The body is beautifully complex.
And then you also mentioned about calorie counting. So I have a big thing with calorie counting because sometimes people come to me and they say they eat so many calories. But then when I look at the food that they eat, it's really empty calories. So all calories are not created equal. If you eat a bag of popcorn, those calories are not equal to veggies with tofu that's full of nutrients and antioxidants and phytonutrients. So I feel that's also a very important key thing to understand. It's not about the amount of calories, but it's having those calories from whole foods, from things that nourish your muscles, that nourish your brain, that nourish everything inside of you.
Definitely. That can't be said any better. Calorie counting can be such a dangerous place to be if you're not educated on how to handle the calories. It's like you have this energy, you have all of the energy amount for the day that your body needs, but you need to break it down into the building blocks of that energy, the proteins, the carbs, the fats. And you have to make sure that when you're consuming those protein, carbs, and fats, that you're consuming good whole foods and that contain them. Yeah, 100%.
Yes. And you can clearly see how that impact of your diet is then on your sports performance because you work closely with athletes. So then, it's easier to see than for the average person just going to work. I feel it's sometimes harder to draw that connection that your diet from this morning, from yesterday, from the day before, really affects your performance at work, but you can see it clearer with your athletes, right?
Yeah, definitely. We have athletes, I don't know if you've heard about it, but somebody like Michael Phelps, the swimmer, they in season, when they're training at volume, they consume something between 8,000 and 12,000 calories a day.
Oh my goodness.
Put that into perspective, the normal person eats around 1,500 to 2,000 calories a day.
Sure.
Right. So going up to 8,000 to 12,000 calories really makes a difference. And now if you break those calories into their building blocks, their proteins, carbs, and fats, if those ratios aren't right for the sport specific person, then that's going to wreak havoc in their performance. Nice. Somebody, for example, like a short distance athlete, somebody like Usain Bolt, for example, Usain Bolt consumes a lot of carbs, because his body is dependent on those carbs as a source of energy while he trains, like I explained earlier when we spoke about those also energy systems. And then somebody like Eliud Kipchoge, the world marathon runner, record holder at the moment.
I'm such a big fan. I watched his breaking too. Yes, he's an incredible athlete.
Yeah, and he will consume a moderate amount of carbs, high volumes of fat and proteins. So it really is dependent on what type of sport you do and how your body has been adapted to use the energy. The normal person sitting at home, like I said, they don't need a specific diet like high this, what restrictive. But athletes do. That's where it matters. And that's also where it matters when you eat, for example. The normal person, you don't have to eat breakfast. You don't have to eat lunch. You don't have to stop eating at 7. There's this big thing where people say, no, the latest you should eat carbs is at 1 because your body can't use the carbs if you're sleeping. That's not how the body functions at all. It's a one huge machine that is so intricate. And eating times only matter for athletes. For example, if you're about to have a high intensity energy using exercise session, you need a little bit of carbs before that session to supply the glucose to use it. But if you're going to be training for 2-3 hours, there's no way your body can consume enough carbs and keep enough carbs in it to function. So then it's going to start tapping some of those carbs, glucose from your liver and from your muscles. And that's also sometimes when people hit the wall during a training session or during a long distance race, for example. If you're 2 hours into a race, your body has depleted all of the carbs, all of the energy sources that you ate. It's also probably close to depleting the liver's supply and the muscle supply. And that's then where you get people who use those sachets during races, for example, to just pump up the caffeine, pump up a little bit of the glucose and get the blood sugar levels normal again, because the brain only uses glucose as an energy source, only uses carbs.
That was something hard for me to learn. So as a wellness doctor and as a lifestyle doctor, I always advise no sugar. We just do things naturally. But then when I'm doing like Ironman distance races, then I can't be eating my natural dates and mangoes on this endurance because my body is not able to absorb those healthy low GI foods. So that's like the one exception when you say, okay, but then when you are doing event more than 6 hours, now you have to use those gels. And I use those gels myself, and I've really been trying to avoid using it. But I just realized that your body then needs easy sugar that just can be absorbed. However, that being said, using that 5 days a year is not going to cause diabetes. What causes diabetes is the daily sugar that we're getting.
Yeah, 100%. And there's also a difference between how your body uses the sugar. For example, while you're exercising, the sugar enters the stomach, goes through the stomach into the blood, and immediately goes into the cell to be used for the running, for example. But if you're just sitting on the couch watching TV, that sugar isn't going into the cell. It's not being used. It's going straight spikes the blood sugar and then goes into the stores. And that's bad. That's where it becomes the issue.
Yes. So for our listeners today, do you have a quick tip for them? How to beat cravings? If someone says, I know how to eat, I know how to exercise, but I just have to have chocolate or cheesecake at night, every night. What should they do?
I mean, I wish I had an easy answer for how to curb your cravings. If somebody creates this magical machine or recipe to do it, then that would be awesome. But I found a few things to really help. So kind of decrease it, and also the mindset you have about it can also help a lot. So what I usually tell my clients when it comes to cravings is you can find a supplementary thing to curb the craving. So you can put something that is healthy in place of the unhealthy thing. For example, you get a lot of low sugar, or
like a sugar-free chocolate that's just cacao, yeah. Like an 80% cacao chocolate that is just cacao. And my mom does that because my mom has quite a sweet tooth and she has to have chocolate every night. But then the way she manages it is to have that very, very dark chocolate. And it's so much cacao, you can't eat the whole slab because it's too much cacao. So it would just be a little block.
Yeah, like something that you can put in place of that thing that kind of heats your cravings all the time. That's the one thing. And the other thing is our body initiates cravings when we haven't consumed enough energy, right? Or when it thinks it hasn't got enough energy yet. Especially in the beginning of a diet, when you're dropping the amount of food you're consuming, or you're changing the amount of food you're consuming, the body's trying to retaliate or make up for the lost energy by getting high energy dense foods. And usually the things you crave for are energy dense, things like chips, crisps, things like chocolate, like you say, puddings and stuff like that. They're low volumes, high amounts of energy in them, and the body is trying to sneakily get in there and get enough calories in for the day. And
I found that. Yeah, I found that with myself. So my whole life, I used to crave chocolate, 10 o'clock at night, chocolate cheesecake. If I don't have it in my house, I'll literally make myself my own cheesecake because I had to have something late at night. But then I've always been endurance running for the past 20 years. I've been doing long distance marathons, long distance things. And only when I got a spot for World Championships triathlon and I started working with a personal coach who looked at my diet and said, I was very pro running on intermittent fasting or running, because I also said, like Eliud Kipchoge, I'm quite sure I'll be fine to run without breakfast. I'm quite sure. And, whenever something new is fashion, like a keto diet or just protein, I've tried all the different diets, and then or vegan, and I've been on everything. And then, so for the past 20 years, I used to train on whatever fad diet I'm on. And then at night, I would have my cravings. So when I got my spot for World Championships, I realized that this is very important. I got a triathlon coach who worked with me with my training, but then also she looked at my nutrition. And she said, no, I need way more calories. And when I started eating the way she wanted me to eat before my training, to eat directly after my training, to eat so many times during the day, then I noticed suddenly my 10 p.m. craving stopped. And it was such a profound discovery for me that, like, being on this eating plan and eating all day long and eating, I had no more cravings. And then World Championships was in June. And then I still did an Ironman in July. And then I stopped focusing so much on my eating because I'm not training for an event. And then I slowly noticed how I started over this past month, started craving things again, 10 o'clock at night. So that was what was the thing for my body. If I'm not giving enough healthy nutrients during the day, I crave that things late at night. And you might think that you're not energy deficient, because I always felt that I'm a normal weight and I eat all day, or I do eat healthy. It's not that my body is lacking things. until I really pushed those things, having a veggie, having a fruit, having a protein with every meal, before training, after training. Suddenly my cravings were gone.
Yeah, something that also really helps a lot is appropriate protein intake.
Yes.
If you are protein
Yes.
deficient, the body is also going to crave. And sometimes the body can't really distinguish as to what nutrient it needs.
Yes.
I don't know. I'm sure you know of it. Like, for example, when somebody needs iron, if they're iron deficient, they like crave sand for some reason.
Yes. Or
and
ice.
Happens to the body,
Or lemon.
or ice.
Yes.
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 And the same happens when you are protein deficient. Sometimes the body just can't make you crave meat, for example, or high protein vegetables. So it just gives you a random craving. And that's then where you end up sitting at 10 p.m. in the evening, eating 2 slabs of chocolate and what else?
Yes, exactly. And that was also the worst bit for me, was the time that I was vegan was the time when I also did endurance riding to Oceans Marathon. And I didn't realize, which we now know, vegan is perfectly good. We must just focus on our protein intake. Whereas my vegan diet while I was in residence really consisted of gluten-free pasta. That was what my vegan was all about. Diet was all about. Yes, and that is so unhealthy for your body. I see it a lot in female athletes, and it's really in our culture for a lot of women. We typically expect women to have a salad and men to have a steak. So I find that that's a lot of teaching to do with females, that you really need those proteins, and not just for our athletes. It's for everyone. It's for those people who don't want to, when they're 90 years old, who want to get up from a chair, without having to push yourself up.
Exactly. And the training as well, something like you said earlier with the hip replacements. A vegan diet is okay if you are managing the amount of protein you're having.
You're
and
smart,
vegan diets, yes, you have to be really clued up about it. Vegan diets, because it's a plant-based protein, it's not a complete protein. So you lack certain protein molecules in certain foods and others not. So you really have to be clued up as to which of those foods, plant-based foods, you have to put together to get a complete protein. And that's also something that you're not always aware of. Or, for example, some certain protein molecules can't enter the bloodstream if it's not in the presence of another one. And that's also something that's really interesting, which you really have to take into consideration. So veganism works if you know what you're doing.
But that what you're mentioning is not just for vegan, it's actually for most nutrients. I was so astounded when I did now more training in nutrition to find out that the way our food is, for example, broccoli or cauliflower, the different nutrients together in broccoli is in such a way that it enables the absorption of the other nutrients. So that's why it's more important to eat veggies and lots of different veggies rather than just taking a supplement. Because a lot of people will ask me, can't they just take a vitamin pill? But it is not, they're not created equal, and vitamin supplements are very helpful for a lot of people, but it's never going to replace whole foods. Food is created in such a way that the combination of nutrients enable your body to absorb it so much better.
100%. Here in South Africa, we're starting to build a brand called Be Wellness, which is focused on supplements and how bad that can be for you if you're not doing it correctly. For example, we're looking at collagen.
Yes.
How when you're consuming a collagen supplement, that molecule cannot enter the bloodstream. It is impossible for a standard collagen prefabricated molecule to enter. It's basically just going to be broken down into the amino acids, enters the blood, and then the body needs to make the collagen again from there. So nothing prompts the body to make collagen after it got all of those amino acids. So you really have to go and have a look at the structure of these molecules inside of a multivitamin, inside of a supplement, if it's actually going to go where it goes. Other examples are L-glutamine, for example.
Yeah, that's a big one.
It's such a cool thing inside of the body after it went through the stomach wall. But before it goes through the stomach wall, there's absolutely no science yet showing us that it can be transported into the blood. So there's so many things that people don't really realize you really need to be aware of when you look at supplements. So that's a big mission on our list for next year, is to go and dig really deep into the supplement industry and see where we can identify these things.
Yes, I should have a chat with you because that's a big thing. I think we'll have to do a whole new podcast specifically on supplements, because that's something I get a lot of questions about, right? And my only tool is to, luckily we do some testing, but only once a supplement is on our Canada approved list, then I can say, okay, yes, you can take the supplement. But then there are so many supplements that are not, and we don't want to waste our money. We don't want to put things into our mouth and into our gut that's not helpful. Stefan, it was so good chatting with you. Thank you so much. Thank you for the amazing work that you and your company are doing with FITT by Stefan. It's really an incredible company, and I really love following you on social, seeing everything you do. It's amazing. You're making life better for so many people. Thank you for that, and thanks for chatting with me today.
Thanks, Daniela, for having me, and I'm excited to see where this podcast goes as well. Guys, if you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, click that button, subscribe. It's really nice to have all of you listen to our stories and our experiences. It's cool to share them with you. And yeah, that is me. I'm out. Thanks for having me. Cheers.
Thanks, Stefan. Take care.
Thank you for listening to this episode today by medical doctor Daniela Steyn. Follow us on social media and subscribe to our newsletter at www.wellnessmdhealth.com to stay up to date on educational resources that will take your quality of life to the next level. The content of this podcast is not intended to be a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Always seek the advice of your healthcare provider. Never disregard medical advice or delay in seeking it because of something you have heard on this podcast. Remember, you are created to thrive.